day 2 of our Frankie jeans sew along. So today we are focusing on the front of the jeans. So I thought I would show you on a finished pair what the end goal is for tonight's sew along. And it should be a relatively quick one tonight, I'm hoping. So what we are doing is the front paneling, and we are adding pockets to the front as well. And as you can see, the way that these pockets have been designed is that the paneling is, the top stitching for the pocket is incorporated into the top stitching of this front panel here. And although it looks simple enough once it's finished, there's a little bit of a trick to getting it right so that all the seams on the inside sit properly. So I'm going to show you how to do that tonight. That's our goal for tonight. And then tomorrow night we will be tackling the zip fly, which will be a fun one as well, and the waistband. So let's kick off tonight's sew along with the front paneling. So here are my pattern pieces. And as I talked about last night on, 2 nights ago on the day 1 of the sew along, when I cut out this pattern, I always pin together the pairs for the panelled pieces so that I don't get mixed up with what goes with what. So I've done that again with the front pattern pieces, and I just did a rough pin, so I haven't actually pinned them properly. So I will do that now. When I was cutting this one out, I put the notch markings on the dark side of the denim, which was not very smart of me, but I can just see it, but you probably can't. So there's 2 notch markings right there that I'm going to pop together. So the first step when we're sewing our front pants with the panels is to pop the panel pieces right sides together. So you'll notice the side piece, if you're doing the pocket, is shorter up the top here, and that is where the little pocket cutout bit is, so that's intentional. But if you aren't adding a pocket at the front, then your front piece will go all the way up to the top there. So I'm just matching the notches there, and then matching at the hem, and then up the top here, and then I'm just going to pop a pin in between each of these just to make sure everything goes together nicely. Whoops. So I'm not sure how many of you have actually watched day 1 of the sew along. So if you have questions as we go along today, please yell out and let me know. I'm going to pin the other side as well so I can just sew them all at once. So I'm matching the notches again. So on day 1 we made the back of the pants, and I gave quite a few tips about top stitching, so I will mention the top stitching tips again tonight just in case you haven't seen day 1. It was uploading just before I started this, but it got to the point where it said processing, and I'm not sure if it ever got any further, so it should be up by the end of tonight. So here are my 2 front pieces all pinned together. Now I'm just going to sew them with a 1 centimetre seam allowance, and I've just got to put some normal thread in my machine because I still have the top stitching thread in there from the previous night. So when we're sewing the internal seams of this pattern, I use regular thread in my machine, and then when it comes to top stitching, that's when I swap my top stitching thread in the needle. Now please let me know if you have any questions as we go along. You made your own shirt. Oh, hello. Hello, Ian Watts. I'm also from Australia. You made your own shirt. That's awesome. I love that. Shirts are a very satisfying sew. Okay, so we've got this pinned together. I'm going to sew with 1 centimetre seam allowance, just starting at the top here. So I did, I don't know if you can hear me while it's sewing. I did say last night in the sew along that my preference with jeans, if I had to choose between front and back pockets, would be back pockets. And I was thinking about it, and it's not just a style preference for me or a functionality preference, but I actually much prefer sewing back pockets as well. So you'll see tonight that these front pockets do come together quite nicely. And I like the way that they look, but I much prefer the back pockets. I think it's the top stitching and the adding the labels that I find fun. Okay, so we've got both of these front panels stitched together now. Both of those have been stitched with 1 centimeter seam allowance. Now I need to finish, both of these raw edges with my overlocker. So I'm going to go and do that now, and I will be right back. Okay, so we've now got our 2 front pieces overlocked. Now you're probably thinking now is when we top stitch these panels, but actually we don't. Not if you are adding pockets. So if you are not adding pockets, you would top stitch now at this point. But because we are adding pockets, you need to hold off on the top stitching. So what we are going to do instead is we're just going to press the top part of this seam towards, towards the side of the leg. So you can see up the top here, that little bit of overlocking, that the seam allowance is going towards the side of the leg. You don't need to press all the way down the leg because we're only working with this top part here with the pocket. So just press that top bit, and then you're going to set your front leg aside for a minute while we work on the pocket piece. So I'll do the same on this side. I'm only pressing this top bit here. So again, the seam allowance is facing towards the side of the leg, and I've just done the top bit, and then I'm going to pop that aside. So now it's time for us to grab our pocket pieces. So I've got my 2 pocket pieces, and I've also got the optional pocket facing. So when you have a look at your jeans, you'll see that this part here is denim that matches the rest of the jeans. But we don't use denim for the whole pocket, for this whole piece, because it's just too thick. It's unnecessary. So inside the pocket is a lightweight woven fabric, but this facing here is the denim. And if you want to use a slightly thicker pocket fabric and have like a feature print in this spot here, you can do that. And in that case, this pocket facing is not necessary. But for the classic jeans look, you would use the pocket facing. So the first thing to do is we are going to overlock these 2 curved edges of our pocket facing. So I'll go and do that, and I will be right back. Okay, so I've got my 2 pocket facings now overlocked. I'm just going to give them a little press to make sure they're nice and flat for this next step, because what we are going to be doing is attaching them to our pocket piece. So I pop it down on top. I don't think I need that anymore. Pop it down on top and line up this top corner here of the pocket with the top corner of the facing. And then once I've got that in the right spot, I'm going to pin it down. So I usually pin one up in the corner there, and then along the bottom edge. So there's one done. Do the same with the other pocket. So lining up the corners up here, the pocket and the pocket facing, and just pinning it on. I'm really glad you're learning something new. That's great. And please do ask questions if something is confusing you, or if you want clarification on any of the things that I'm doing. Okay, so we've got those now pinned on. What we're going to do is stitch them onto the pocket piece. Along this bottom curved edge, I'm going to use a normal stitch length. And then on these top sides, I am going to increase my stitch length to a basting stitch. So 5 for my stitch length along these top and side edges. So I'll grab my machine now. You can change your thread color to match either your overlocking thread or your pocket piece, but I'm not going to bother today because I think it will be easier for you to see if I don't, and also I'm just being lazy and saving time. So I'm stitching this right where my second row of my overlocking stitch is, and it's just attaching that pocket facing to the pocket piece. So once I get here and pivot, I'm then increasing my stitch length for these last 2 sides. Okay, there's one done. This one I'm going to start with the basting so I don't have to change my stitch length. And now I'm at the bottom, I'm going to put my stitch length back down to 2.5 and sew this curved edge. So now we have our 2 pocket pieces ready. So I'm going to get one of my pant legs back, and that's this one. So with my pant leg right side up, I'm going to pop my pocket piece down on top with right side down. So the side with the facing on it is facing down, and I'm just going to pin it to the pocket opening here. So when you are sewing this one, there's a bit of a trick to trying to get it lined up perfectly with this panel here. So what I'm going to do is just grab my erasable marker here. So we're going to be sewing down and then, down and then across. But to get this so that it hits right where that paneling is there, I'm just going to mark with my pen. I'm feeling along to where that fold of the seam is, and I'm just marking it with my pen so that when I'm stitching down, I want to be either on that line or slightly to the left of it. And that way it's going to line up perfectly with my front panel piece. So again, we've got a 1-inch seam allowance here. And I'm just going to move that back a little bit. I was hoping that you can see where I'm sewing there. So I'm going straight down, and again I'm aiming for that blue line there. And then we pivot and go diagonally across. So there's our first pocket attached. I'm going to grab the other one now. So here's our other pants piece, our other pocket piece. So again, I'm pinning it on. Oops. Pinning it onto the pocket opening. And I'm going to do the same trick with my marker. So, oops. I'm feeling along with my finger to where that folded edge is there. You can even use your nail to make a little dent, but I'm going to then draw on with my pen. So that's where I'm going to pivot and sew. So I know I'm going to line up perfectly with these panels underneath. Okay, so I'll show you a little bit closer now what I have done. So you can see my blue line there. My stitching is just ever so slightly to the right of it, which means that when we turn it out, you can see it's going to line up perfectly with that front panel underneath, and the same on this side. So what we're going to do next is we're going to clip the corner here and turn our pocket to the wrong side of our pant piece. So I'm just going to clip straight into that corner. You've got to be really careful here not to actually cut your stitches, which can be a little bit tricky to get all the way in there without cutting the stitches. I'm going to go a little bit further. I feel like those scissors are not very sharp anymore. All right, so that's pretty good. Now I'm going to do the other one. So straight into the corner. There we go. So you want to get as close as you can to your stitches without cutting them. Now the other thing that we need to do, because we have this lovely paneling on the front of our jeans, is we just need to put a little clip here so that this seam allowance can be pressed towards the front crotch. So just like we did on the back crotch, we want the seam allowance to go that way. So you just need to pop a little clip there so that the seam allowance can then fold the other direction. So I'll do that on this side as well. A little clip, and then our seam allowance is free to move. So now we need to grab our iron, and we're going to press all of this. All right. Okay, so now I've got my pressing pad here. The first thing that I'm going to do actually is I'm going to press my seam allowance towards the front crotch. So this is the front crotch here, and we're going to fold the seam allowance that way and then press it. So all the way along the leg, the seam allowance is going to be pressed towards the front crotch. And as I was saying last night in the day one of this sew along, I usually do just a light press from the back side, and then when I get to the right side, I then do a more thorough press. So while I've got it wrong sides up, I'm also going to, I'll go back a step. So I've pressed the seam allowance. Now we're getting the pocket piece and we're folding it towards the wrong side. So you just grab your pocket, flip it over to the wrong side of the fabric, and then we're going to press it. So just getting all of these straight edges up here nice and crisp. Make sure the seam allowance of the panels is still going towards the crotch. And I'm going to press that. Now in this corner here, I want to try and get that corner as nice as possible. If it's getting a little bit crinkly like that, usually it means that you haven't clipped quite far enough in there. And I was having trouble with my scissors, and I'm worried about actually cutting my stitches if I go any further. So I'm going to leave it. That's good enough for me. So now I'm flipping it to the right side, and I'm going to press this seam again. So now I'm doing a more thorough press so that it's ready for me to top stitch next. Okay, so that's one leg done. So I'll move on to the other leg. So as before, I'm going to start by pressing this seam allowance here towards the front crotch. So I'll do a light press from the wrong side. There we go. And then we are getting our pocket again and flipping it over to the wrong side. And then we're going to press the top edge of the pocket. So get that nice and straight. At this point, I also make sure that my pockets lined up nicely with the side seam. And press that corner really well. Right there. Okay, then turn it over. Do a nice thorough press from the front. So the next step after this is to top stitch. But again, because of the pockets and the paneling, there's a little bit of a trick to this. So what we need to do first is top stitch the leg, but we can't top stitch straight from the top to the bottom because that would mean that we are stitching our pocket to the pants, which we don't want. We want our pocket fabric to move freely. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to fold this pocket fabric up out of the way and just pop a little pin in it there to make sure it stays up out of the way. And I'm going to top stitch my leg piece starting just about here. So if I look over the other side, that's below where the pocket fabric is. So I'm not going to be catching any of that pocket fabric. And I'm just going to stitch from that pin down the leg of the jeans to the bottom. So I'll do that now. First I need to pop my top stitch thread in. And as I was explaining on the day one of the sew along, when you are using denim top stitching thread, the top stitching thread only goes in the needle of your machine. It does not go in the bobbin. So in the bobbin, you just use regular thread and then the top stitching thread in the needle. And I like to top stitch with my seam allowance always facing to the left. I put my needle in the middle position and my stitch length at 3.5. And my first row of top stitching, I sew as close as I can to this seam here that we've just sewn. So my first row is going to be just straight down as close as I can to that seam. And I'm going to keep going until I get to that needle that I popped in, the pin, sorry. And then when I get to that pin, I'm going to stop. Now, I'm just going to raise my needle and leave these threads long because I'm going to tie them off at the back later. So now that I've done that, I'm going to sew my second line of top stitching. And this one, I'm going to be lining up exactly 1/4 inch from this first line of top stitching. So the way that I do that is that I have got a marking on my presser foot that I know is 1/4 inch from where the needle is. And so I line up my top line of top stitching with that marking on the presser foot and keep that equal distance the whole way down. So I know that my top stitching will remain a consistent 1/4 inch from the first row. Okay, so again, I'm going to raise my needle, keep those thread tails long because I'm going to tie them off at the back. So now you can see my top stitching all the way down that first leg. So starting, it's probably about 1.5 inches from the edge of the pocket and going all the way to the bottom of the leg. Now what we are going to do is we're going to put our pocket fabric back down, and now we are going to top stitch along here and then along this edge of the pocket. So I will do first I will do this part. So I'm going to start stitching exactly on that line of top stitching so that it will join seamlessly with that line of top stitching. So I'll start there and I will go all the way down and to the edge, and then I will do another row that joins seamlessly with this second line of top stitching and goes all the way to the edge. So when I'm doing this, I'm just going to make sure that these threads are out of the way, and I'm very carefully lining up my needle, and I'm actually going to use my hand wheel to pop it down exactly where that other line of stitching ends. And then away we go. And then when you get to this corner of the pocket, just keep going straight along the edge of the pocket, as close to the edge of the pocket as you can get, and up to the top. So I'll show you here. You can see those two threads are going to be tied off, but it's a seamless join right there. So now I'm going to do exactly the same with the other line of top stitching. So I'm using my hand wheel to get the needle down exactly in the right spot to start, and then off we go. There we go, so another line of top stitching there, and I obviously will tie off these threads later. So So the next thing we need to do is 2 lines of top stitching on this edge of the pocket. So the first line will be as close as possible to the edge of the pocket, and then obviously the next one would be 1/4 of an inch in from that. And I like to cross over this top stitching just for a little bit of extra strength in that corner there. I go all the way to the other side of that second line of top stitching. I'll show you what I mean in a second. So rather than stopping my stitching here, I go all the way to the second line of top stitching there, just to give it a little bit of extra strength in that corner. So now I'm lining up the first line of top stitching with that line on my presser foot again, and sewing a second line of top stitching, again going all the way across to that second line of my vertical top stitching. So there we go, there's one top stitched pocket. So what I'm going to do now is grab my other front piece, and I'm going to do the exact same process again with this piece. So first I move my pocket out of the way and pin it up there so that it's not going to get caught, and pop a little pin in for where I want to start my top stitching. Now, because I always like to have my seam allowance towards the left, I'm actually going to be starting this top stitching at the top of the leg, whereas last time I started it at the bottom of the leg. So actually, that reminds me, I need to have long thread tails here so that I can tie them in later. So I'm just pulling up the thread from my bobbin, long but not too long. There we go. And now I will, where was my pin? About there. So first line is as close as possible to the seam. And now for second line, 1/4 of an inch from the first one. And again, I'm going to pull up my bobbin thread so I've got long tails to tie in later. Oh, okay, my bobbin has just run out of thread. So now might be a good time if you want to go and get a coffee or a snack, because I just need to rewind my bobbin. Also a good time to think of any questions that you have that you might like to ask. Pop them in the comments and I will do my best to answer any questions that you have. Oh, hello, Anne-Marie. Welcome. You've never watched my videos before. Oh, how lovely you're sewing for your grandchildren. I agree, it is a shame. My daughters do textiles at school, but so far they've only sewn bags. They haven't actually done any clothing, and it's not essential, so I think they do a little taster course, and then they get to choose whether they want to continue or not. But I am also a primary school teacher, and I've said many times to my class, I wish I could teach you how to sew. A lot of them are interested, but I think with that age group, it's a bit of a safety issue. Okay, so I have fixed my bobbin, and I don't know why I just put normal thread back in the top of my machine. So popping my top stitching thread back in so we can continue with this pocket. Right, so back to getting my long thread tails, and I'm going to continue with this second line of top stitching here. So I'm starting at the same spot as the first line, and I'm sewing 1/4 of an inch from the first line. Oh, something's not sounding good there. Don't think I loaded my bobbin correctly. Let's try that again. Okay. That out of there. See if this one works better. No. I've done something wrong. Oops. I think it's actually my top thread. I'm just going to get a little scrap piece of fabric to test on. Let me just check I've threaded this properly before I go in with my proper jeans again. There we go, that's better. It was the old, if the problem's at the bottom, you need to fix the top. I've heard that one before. So I was getting tangles at the bottom because my needle at the top was not threaded properly. Just get those bits of, pick those bits. And then we'll be ready to go again. Okay, we're back. So, back to sewing that second line of top stitching. Make sure I'm still on 3.5 stitch length. Oh, that sounds better, doesn't it? Okay, so second line of top stitching is done. Now we're going to top stitch the pocket. So I'm going to take that pin out, and the first thing we are going to do is sew our top stitching straight down from the top edge there along the edge of the pocket, and then continue on until we reach that top stitching there. And we're going to stop exactly on that top line of top stitching. So it's a little bit tricky at the top here because you want to be really close to the edge of the pocket. And then continue on straight after the pocket ends until you get to your top stitching. So I'm stopping exactly on top of my top stitching there. I'm going to leave the threads long so that I can tie them off later. So that's the first row done. Now I'm doing the second row. Keep those threads out of the way so they don't get tangled up. And there we go. So there's our top stitching of our pocket done. So it joins up perfectly with the top stitching of the panels. And now I'm going to do 2 lines of top stitching across this diagonal part of the pocket opening. So I'm starting this time on the far left top stitching line, and I'm going to go all the way across to the edge, sewing as close as I can to the pocket edge. So that first line is done. Now I'm going to do another one 1/4 of an inch from that first line. Okay, so we've got a lot of threads in the way here, which will all be tied in later. But you can see we've got the 2 lines that go vertically all the way down the leg, so they've got a seamless join up here, and then we've got the 2 lines that go across the pocket opening, so it's the same on both sides. So our next step is we turn our pants over to the wrong side, and we are going to fold our pocket over. Actually, I think it might be easier for me to tie these threads in first. So I'm just going to pull these threads to the wrong side of my pocket. Oh, sorry, not of my pocket, of my pants. And then tie them off before I sew the bottom of my pocket closed, because it will just be a lot easier to do it now. All I'm doing is popping the ends through a needle and sewing them over to the other side. It's very hard to do this without getting my head in the way of the camera. Test for my eyesight. There we go. And the last one. Okay. So I'll tie off these threads. And the reason that I have chosen to do it this way is because I wanted to avoid having the back stitching on the front of the pants, because the back stitching from where I've sewn the lower part of the pant leg and then the back stitching from this top part here, where it joins then becomes a really obvious join. It's not a seamless kind of look like it is now. So I will show you from the front side what this now looks like without the back stitching, and you'll understand what I mean and why I have added this a little bit of work for myself. And now when we turn over, you can see here that there's no back stitching, so it all just kind of blends in. So now back on the wrong side, what we are going to do is grab our pocket piece and fold it over in half so that the pocket is now doubled over on itself. And you give it a quick press, and then I'm going to pin the bottom of the pocket. So I'm only pinning through the actual pocket pieces now. I'm not pinning the pants leg. So as you can see, the pocket is separate from the pants leg, and I've just pinned through the pocket layers. So from the front, you can now see that section of the facing, remember that we sewed onto the pocket before, and then from the back we can see our pocket piece. So what we're going to do now is we're going to sew along the bottom edge of this pocket here, so the pocket is then closed, and then we're going to overlock it. So I'm taking my top stitching thread out of my machine for this, and I'm just using my normal thread. Now what you can do, as I mentioned before when I was sewing this pocket facing on, you can use a thread here that matches the colour of your pocket. I'm not going to bother, I'm just going to stick with this colour. So we're sewing this with a 1 centimetre seam allowance down the bottom of the pocket, and it's with regular thread. So no top stitching thread for this part. And I'm back stitching at the start and at the end. Here we go, so the bottom of the pocket is now sewn closed. Now I'm just going to go over to my overlocker, and I'm going to overlock that bottom part of the pocket. There we go, so I have overlocked that. Now I'm going to thread these threads through just to finish that off. Probably need a needle with a bigger eye on it for this. There we go, so I'm just going to thread that back through the overlocking here to tie off that end. There we go. And the only thing left to do on this side of our pants piece is an optional step to baste along the top and the sides. So I'm going to do that. This just helps to keep your pocket piece in place when you're sewing all of the other parts of these pants. So just sew a quick basting stitch along the top, and then a quick basting stitch down the side here, And this is going through both layers of the pocket and of the pants piece. And that's going to make sure that, you can see that on the back side here, all of that stays in place when we're sewing our side seams and our waistband later on. So now we've completely finished this pant leg, I'm going to do the exact same thing over on this other pant leg. So to begin with, I'm going to sew in these threads from the front. So just like I did on the other leg, I'm going to take them over to the wrong side and tie them off. I think this top stitching on this side looks even neater than the other side. And one of these threads is quite small, so could be tricky to tie off. Okay, so now we've got them on the wrong side, I'm going to tie them together. This has actually been quite a short section of the sew along tonight. Get to bed early. Okay, almost done. Got these ones here to tie off. Oh, those ones were back stitched, so they're okay. All right. So, as I did with the other side, I'm going to grab my pressing pad. So I'm going to fold the pocket in half on itself. I'm not sure what happened with this pocket piece. And then I'm going to sew along the bottom of the pocket piece, and then I'm going to overlock it. So start off by stitching the bottom with a 1 centimetre seam allowance. So, sorry, I should have pinned it. And now I will take it over to my overlocker. Okay, I have overlocked that. Now I'm just going to tie in the ends. So popped the ends into a needle, and I'm just threading it back through the overlocking stitches, so back through the loops of the overlocking stitches. And trim that off. And now I'm just going to baste my pocket. So I'm going to sew basting stitch along this edge and this edge. So I'm increasing to a 5 stitch length and just doing a quick basting stitch. So that's on the side and then also along the top. And there we have it. So we've got our front legs finished. So we've done the panels down the front legs with the pocket integrated into it, with the pocket facing and all of the lovely top stitching. So that's it for day 2 of the sew along. Tomorrow night, same time, same place, I will be showing you how to do the zip fly on the jeans with a really clean professional finish. And then I'm hoping, if that doesn't take too long, we'll also get to do the side seams and the waistband tomorrow night as well. So we'll be back here again. Hopefully you can join me. And I'll also be uploading a slightly shortened version of this on the YouTube channel for playback. So thanks again and see you tomorrow.